What is up, guys? Marcellus Williams, aka TheSwolefessor, here to educate you on health, fitness, social well-being. And today, guys, I want to talk to you about why lifting heavy does not automatically lead to injury, as well as explain the difference between strength training and powerlifting. And the reason I want to do this, guys, is for a couple of reasons. One, you guys already know that I've explained in more ways than one the connection between strength and hypertrophy. People will say that they're interested in maximizing their muscle growth, yet they'll never want to train for strength, or they never want to like lift heavy. They do focus on increasing their total volume, but it's always just through like sets and reps. They misunderstand the fact that your total volume comes from sets, reps, and weight. So you want to gradually increase all of those different aspects, as well as the fact, guys, that a lot of people seem to have this misunderstanding that like, well, I don't care, like, I don't care about powerlifting, so why would I ever train for strength? I care about aesthetics, that's why I train like, quote unquote, like a bodybuilder. I've already done videos over why certain bodybuilding techniques aren't even good for building muscle mass, and I'll leave a link to that video in the description down below. But what I basically want to explain, guys, is the fact that first and foremost, lifting heavy doesn't automatically equal injury, right? Because you have to look at exactly what causes injuries. I've already done videos explaining the importance of things like, warming up properly, proper mobility work, which is going to vary from person to person based upon, what your issues are. And that's going to change over time. You're going to end up doing different types of mobility work as you get stronger and as you see what kind of issues you deal with. For some of you, maybe you deal with tightness in your back. Others of you, maybe tightness in your hips, your hamstrings, lack of glute activation. So your mobility and your dynamic warm-up work that you do before you start lifting is going to vary from person to person. I've already explained the importance of doing things like that. I've also explained the importance of acclimation sets. That's the whole purpose of warming up. Like if you're doing squats with the bar, then 135, 225, however you go about doing it, the purpose of those warm-up sets is to help acclimate your nervous system, so that way you can perform more efficiently when you're doing your actual working sets, which of course is going to help with preventing injury, simply in the fact that you're more warmed up, you're more comfortable with the movement, so you're more than likely going to maintain proper form, because we know that proper form not only helps us to lift stronger, but it helps us to lift for longer because it allows us to maintain proper form, which is going to help, just with protecting our body, right? Because that's what proper form is all about. It makes the lift more efficient in terms of the amount of weight you can move, but also protecting your body. So understanding those things, guys, we have to look at then what does actually cause injuries. Things like overuse. That's something that can cause injuries when you're doing the same type of movement pattern over and over and over. Things like excessively high volume, and that's going to vary from person to person as well. What's high volume for one person may be high volume for somebody else, but the point is, if you're constantly doing more work, total work in which your body can recover from, that's going to eventually lead to injuries as well. It's going to eventually lead to form breakdown, and it's just going to lead to overall detriment to your health. The same thing with training with too high intensity too often. If you're working with workloads that are too heavy for you to handle all the time, of course, that's also going to lead to form breakdown, and that's going to lead to injuries. And I feel like that's where people associate, that's why people associate like lifting heavy with injuries. They'll see people like, oh, he was lifting, a lot of weight and he hurt himself. But really, in actuality, what happened was that he probably dealt with form breakdown, and that's what led to injury. You can have form breakdown even if you're working with like 70% of your 1 rep max. If you do enough reps, or if you're just not being aware of your positioning, it's easy to have poor form and to get an injury whether you're lifting heavy or not. So it's important to understand that. It's also important to understand, guys, that muscle imbalances will lead to injuries. If you're somebody where you're doing a lot of pressing all the time but not a lot of pulling, you're walking around like this, you're going to eventually have shoulder issues. If you're always doing a lot of quad dominant work but you're not working on your hamstrings, that's going to lead to knee issues. So muscle imbalances are also going to be an issue. So when we look at things like that, basically knowing that, okay, the problem is that I'm working with loads that are too heavy, or I'm too weak for the loads that I'm working with, or things like muscle imbalances, in actuality, strength training is one of the best things you can do to help prevent all of that, to help with your overall health and longevity. And the thing is, strength training is not powerlifting. When we talk about strength training, guys, I'm referring to building up your entire body and trying to maximize both strength and muscle growth, because once again, the two go hand in hand. If you're about maximizing your strength, you're going to want to maximize your muscle growth. Why? Our muscles help us do what? Move, produce force. The more muscle mass you have, the more total force you can produce, the more weight you're going to be able to lift. And once again, the two go hand in hand. If you want to maximize muscle growth, you're going to want to try to get as strong as possible. If you want to maximize strength, you want to try to get as big as possible. You want to maximize your muscle growth as well. And when you do that in a balanced way, using a variety of movements, not just the big three, not just bench, squat, and deadlift, but overhead press, weighted pull-ups, weighted dips, incline presses, different variations of rows, other leg movements such as lunges, Romanian deadlifts. When you do stuff like that, when you're focused on overall strength training, you're gonna build your body up as a whole. You're gonna get stronger as a whole, which is gonna help you prevent muscle imbalances and prevent overuse injuries, because you're not just doing 2 to 3 movements and that's it. You're doing other movements as well. You're throwing in some accessory work to help build up your weak points and to help maintain that balance. And that's honestly going to be very healthy for you. I think a lot of people assume that you're trying to get strong to be a powerlifter, and that's simply not correct. I have been lifting for 6 going on 7 years, and for that entire time, my focus has always been strength training to get stronger. I've only been actually powerlifting for 2 going on 3 years, and I only really got focused more on just powerlifting only. Not that I don't still do accessory work and things for aesthetics, but like really just getting more focused on the big 3 really within the past year. So there's a significant difference. With strength training, your goal is to get strong on all your movements collectively, to build your body up through doing that. With powerlifting, the goal is purely your total between the big 3, bench, squat, and deadlift. And oftentimes people, yes, they obviously powerlifters want to get stronger on those movements, but sometimes the way they go about increasing their total isn't even about increasing their actual strength. Sometimes it's through cutting the range of motion. When you see powerlifters that have like just a crazy excessive arch to where they can move more weight than what they'd be able to move if they just like were, had less of an arch, that is increasing their total, but it's not necessarily building up their strength. Furthermore, when you're constantly doing the same movements, when you're squatting 3 times a week, when you're deadlifting 1 or 2 times a week, when you're benching 3 to 4 times a week, and you're not throwing in accessory work or other variations of the movements or other movements in general to help balance things out, that's what's going to lead to overuse injuries, especially if you're not keeping in mind your recovery. If you're doing a lot of workload with those 3 movements only, and you're training with a lot of high intensity, and you're not using proper programming to make sure that you make more volume focused days, strength focused days, technique focused days, days where basically when you look at throughout the total week, yes, your weekly volume is sufficient, but you're not just doing so much on one day to where you wreck your body for the rest of the week. That's gonna, if you do that, then you're good, but if you don't, it's gonna lead to injuries, right? And I just think it's important for people to understand that distinction. Strength training and powerlifting are not the same thing. I feel that everybody should be doing strength training. The same way that cardio is important for your heart health and for your overall longevity, so is strength training for strengthening your muscles, your bones, your joints, making sure that you're training on your big movements and your accessory movements, going through a proper full range of motion. That's not the same thing as powerlifting. Powerlifting is a competitive endeavor. And in a lot of ways, it's not healthy. It's not optimal. When you're doing things where you're constantly like cutting down the range of motion, you're not training your muscles through the full range of motion. When you're constantly training with heavy loads over and over again, not to say that you're not still gonna be healthier than someone who's sedentary, not doing anything, but you're gonna see oftentimes, yes, a lot of powerlifters do deal with a bunch of aches and pains, etc. It's not the healthiest thing, in the same way that bodybuilding isn't healthy when you're going through these huge shifts of like extreme bulks and then like really fast cuts, getting down to like single-digit body fats. It's obviously not healthy, but once again, people have associated training for muscle with bodybuilding. You can train for overall hypertrophy and health without getting involved in bodybuilding. You can train for general strength without getting involved in powerlifting. So I just wanted to make that distinction and kind of make this clear that those of you who are worried about like, training heavier or having heavier days because you feel like you're gonna hurt yourself, that's simply not the case. So long as you are keeping in mind your total weekly workload, making sure that it's something you can adapt to and recover from week to week, as long as you're being aware of your warm-ups as far as your mobility work, your dynamic work, as long as you're keeping in mind proper form and doing the movements correctly, training them through a full range of motion, not half-repping everything for the sake of your ego, or not just adding weight endlessly without having a structured form of progressive overload where you gradually are increasing the load on the bar, you're gradually increasing reps and sets, etc. As long as you do those things, you really don't have anything to worry about. If anything, you're gonna be less prone to injuries, because if you think about the amount of people who get injured doing things outside of the gym. Something as simple, and it's something that could have been avoided if they maybe would have been a little bit stronger, been able to handle a load. Something as simple as bending over and picking something up the wrong way. You're gonna have less risk of injury if you're used to deadlifting, right, than if you're sedentary and then you try to do some heavy lifting like outside the gym for whatever reason. Just simple things like that. Something as simple as certain issues that people have with their Achilles tendon that could have been avoided if their calves were a little bit stronger. When I did my video over like calves and the importance of training them, not just for aesthetic but from health purposes, I explained the fact that oftentimes people can have ankle issues because of a lack of calf strength. If they step the wrong way, they walk or run the wrong way, and a lot of that goes on to like their tendons and the joints instead of the calf muscle itself, because the calf muscle isn't used to being worked. That's just one example of the importance of like actually doing general strength training, especially as you get older, guys. It becomes even more important. Look at all the people who are older, who are very sedentary, or they're in wheelchairs, or they fall and they break their hips. Things like that can be avoided when you build your body up, but it's building your body up as a whole, as one unit. Not just focusing on 3 movements, bench, squat, and deadlift, but getting stronger on a variety of movements. So yeah, I just wanted to explain that, guys, because I feel like it's really important. I think that a lot of you already have this understanding. Hopefully by now, if you've been on the channel long enough, knowing the importance of, you know, strength and muscle mass and how they go hand in hand. But I just wanted to make it very clear, just because you can get bigger from just high volume, meaning just increasing sets and reps, doesn't mean that you shouldn't have days where you are focused on actually increasing the load on the bar, because it's just gonna help you optimize and maximize your results as a whole. But yeah, that's it for the video, guys. I'm sorry if it was a little bit repetitive, but I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, go ahead and leave a comment down below, let me know what you did. If you did not, leave a comment down below, let me know what I can do to get better. Like the video, share, subscribe. Keep it simple, specific, scientific. I'll catch y'all later.